Welcome to HOA Craze. The HOA wanted control, not safety. My name is David, and the moment Linda Perez grabbed my snow brush from the hood of my car and held it up like evidence at a crime scene, I knew she had just handed me the win. She was screaming something about personal property left out in violation of winter compliance standards, and I was standing there in my green jacket and blue knit cap thinking, go ahead, put that in writing. This was Fort Collins, Colorado, February 2025, and I had moved into the cottages at Snowline 3 months earlier because the rent was low and I needed every dollar. I work inventory control at a warehouse, tracking every single item and timestamp that moves through the building, so when the HOA started inventing deadlines and phantom violations, they picked the wrong guy. The cottages at Snowline Winter Compliance Association was the kind of place where the board treated snow like a criminal offense, and Linda Perez, the records custodian, acted like she owned the weather. I was paying for my mom's medical bills out of pocket, and every bogus fine they threw at me was another week I couldn't cover her prescriptions. The first sign of trouble came the morning after the January storm when I found a notice zip-tied to my doorknob, citing a doormat with snow on it as a slip hazard, and I knew right then this was going to get ugly. Linda was in my face now, breath fogging in the freezing air, her red hair whipping around under that red beanie, her pink parka unzipped enough to show the portable thermal printer clipped to her belt. She loved that thing. Instant violations, printed on the spot, no waiting. She shook the snowbrush at me and said, "This is abandoned property under Section 12-4, and I am issuing you a fine effective immediately." I kept my voice calm and said, "That is my snowbrush. I used it 10 minutes ago. It is on my car." She snapped back, "If you want mercy, move somewhere without an HOA," and then she turned and walked away, printer already whirring. I pulled out my phone and filmed the whole thing. I had started recording every interaction after the doormat incident because Linda had a habit of changing her story. The doormat fine notice had cited some emergency winter slip hazard rule, but when I asked for a copy of the rule from the portal, the link was dead. I called the management company, and they told me to contact the records custodian. I emailed Linda, and she replied 3 days later saying document requests required a $20 processing fee and a 2-week turnaround. By then, the fine had doubled for non-compliance. The snow kept coming. Every storm brought new enforcement. Linda claimed my driveway had a half-inch of snow left after I shoveled, so she fined me for incomplete removal. She said my trash cans were blocking a snow route even though they were on my own property. She printed a notice claiming I had created a refreeze hazard by shoveling too early in the morning before temperatures rose. The violations piled up, and every time I pushed back, she cited deadlines I had never been told about. The HOA portal showed no messages, no alerts, no rule updates. I started taking screenshots of everything. I logged every email, every notice, every conversation. I tracked timestamps like I was auditing inventory, because that is what I do. Linda came back 2 days later with backup. I was clearing the walkway in front of my unit when a black SUV pulled up and 3 people got out. Linda, another board member I recognized from the community FB page, and some guy in a suit who looked like he wished he was anywhere else. Linda marched up my walkway without asking, stepped onto my porch, and started taking photos of my doormat. I said, "You are on my property, you need to leave." She held up her phone and said, "We are conducting a compliance inspection. This is within our authority." The guy in the suit looked uncomfortable and said, "Actually, we should have scheduled this." Linda cut him off and said, "He waived his rights when he refused to comply." I kept my phone recording and said, "I have complied with every rule I was actually notified about, and you are trespassing." She leaned in close, smiled, and said, "I can fine you daily until the snow melts and you cry." That was the boomerang line. I made a mental note of it because I knew she was going to regret saying it on camera. The next day, I got a notice claiming I had missed an appeal deadline. The notice said I had 15 days from the original violation to file a written appeal, and today was day 16. I pulled up my records. The original doormat notice had no appeal instructions. I checked the HOA bylaws on the website, and the appeal section was blank, just a placeholder that said content coming soon. I emailed the management company and got an auto reply. I called and got voicemail. I drove to their office, and the receptionist said the HOA liaison was out indefinitely. I needed help. I called my cousin's husband, Marcus, who is a local attorney. He does not handle HOA cases, but he knows the system. We met for coffee, and I showed him everything. The notices, the emails, the videos, the screenshots of the broken portal. He shook his head and said, "They are setting you up for a lien. If you do not fight this now, they will claim you owe thousands in fines and legal fees, and they will put a lien on your property." "I do not own the property," I said. "I rent." He said, "Even worse, because your landlord will get the lien notice and might just pay it to make it go away, then come after you for the money." He leaned back and said, "You need to document everything, file a formal complaint with the management company, and if that does not work, you go to small claims." But here's the thing, HOAs hate exposure. If you can prove they violated their own process, they will fold fast. Marcus gave me a checklist. First, send a certified letter to the board demanding copies of all violation notices, the rules cited, and the appeal process. Second, file a complaint with the state regulatory agency if the HOA is licensed. Third, keep recording everything. Fourth, show up to the next board meeting and demand answers in public. He said, they rely on people being scared and isolated, so the moment you make it public, they panic. I went home and drafted the letter. I cited every violation by date, asked for the specific rule section, and demanded a written explanation of why the portal had no appeal instructions. I sent it certified mail, return receipt requested. Then I posted in the neighborhood Facebook group. I kept it factual. I said, "Has anyone else had trouble accessing the appeal process on the portal? Because I am being told I missed a deadline that was never communicated." Within an hour, I had 6 replies, people saying the same thing. One neighbor messaged me privately and said, "This happened to me last year. Linda told me I had no right to appeal because I missed the window, and I ended up paying $800 in fines I did not owe." She said, "I have the emails if you need them." If this sounds insane, hit like and subscribe, because it gets so much worse. That was when the gate access started glitching. The cottages at Snowline has a main vehicle gate with a code system. My code stopped working the same day I posted in the group. I called the management company, got voicemail, left a message. I tried the pedestrian gate, and that code was dead too. I had to park on the street outside the complex and walk in through a gap in the fence. Linda saw me coming through and made a point of standing there with her phone, filming me. She said, "Using unauthorized entry points is a violation." I said, "My codes do not work." I reported it. "I am waiting for a response." She said, "That is not my problem," and walked away. The next morning, my car was booted. I came out to move it before street sweeping, and there was a bright yellow wheel lock on the front driver's side tire. No notice, no warning, just a boot. I called the number on the sticker, and it went to a towing company. They said the HOA had requested the boot for repeat parking violations. I said, "I am parked on a public street, not HOA property." The dispatcher said, "Take it up with them. We just do what we are told." I called the non-emergency police line, and the officer who answered said, "If it is a private street, the HOA can enforce parking rules, but if it is public, that is illegal." He said, "I will send someone out to check." The deputy showed up 20 minutes later, checked the street sign, and said, "This is a public street. The HOA has no authority here." He radioed the towing company and told them to remove the boot immediately or face a complaint. The tow truck came, and the driver unhooked it without a word. I asked who ordered it, and he just shrugged and drove off. Linda was watching from across the street, arms folded, that smug look on her face. That night, I got an email from the management company. It was not a reply to any of my messages. It was a new violation notice. The email said I had failed to maintain snow clearance on my assigned walkway, and because this was a repeat offense, I was being fined $200 per day until compliance was achieved. The email was dated that morning, but I had just received it at 8 p.m. I went outside with a flashlight and checked the walkway. It was clear. I had shoveled it that afternoon. But the wind had been blowing all evening, and there was a light dusting of new snow, maybe a quarter inch, drifting across the concrete. The email cited some emergency rule about continuous clearance during active snow events. I checked the HOA website. The rule was not there. I took photos of the walkway, time-stamped, showing minimal accumulation. I replied to the email with the photos and said, "I cleared this walkway 4 hours ago. The dusting is from wind drift, not negligence, and I was never notified of any continuous clearance requirement." The reply came back in under 5 minutes. It said, "Wind drift is not an acceptable excuse. Your responsibility is to ensure continuous compliance regardless of weather conditions. Failure to do so will result in escalating fines and a formal hearing." I sat there staring at my phone, doing the math. $200 a day. If they claimed a week of violations, that was $1,400. If they backdated it, even worse. I pulled up my bank account and felt my chest tighten. I had enough to cover rent and my mom's next prescription refill, but not both if I had to fight a bogus fine. Marcus had said they would fold if I could prove process violations. I started building the case. I made a spreadsheet, every violation, every notice, every email, every rules citation. I cross-referenced the citations against the HOA governing documents on file with the county. Half the rules Linda cited did not exist, the other half existed, but the notice deadlines she claimed were wrong. I found the appeal process buried in the bylaws, and it clearly stated that appeal instructions must be included in every notice, and the deadline was 30 days, not 15. I printed everything, highlighted the discrepancies, and put it in a binder. Then I found the smoking gun. I had filed a vendor application 3 months earlier for a handyman to do some work on my unit. The HOA required pre-approval for any outside contractors. I submitted the application through the portal, got an auto confirmation, and never heard back. The handyman did the work, and I paid him. 2 weeks later, Linda sent me a violation notice claiming I had used an unapproved vendor and owed a $500 fine. I replied with a screenshot of the application submission. She said the application was denied. I said, I never received a denial. She said, it was posted on the portal. I checked. Nothing. I asked for proof. She sent me a PDF of a denial letter dated the day after my application, but the metadata showed it was created last week. I forwarded that to Marcus. He called me back in 10 minutes and said, that is fraud. She backdated a document to justify a fine. You need to file a formal complaint immediately. But I did not file yet. I held on to it. I knew the complaint would trigger a response, and I wanted them to escalate first. I wanted them all in, committed, on the record, before I flipped the table. I took the fine notice without flinching, because I knew what it would trigger. The board meeting was scheduled for the first Thursday of the month. I marked it on my calendar. Marcus said, show up, bring copies of everything, and when they open the floor for homeowner comments, you read your statements, you hand them the evidence, and you let them panic. I spent the week preparing. I wrote a 2-page statement, attached exhibits, made copies for every board member. I practiced reading it out loud so I would not stumble. The day before the meeting, I got a text from an unknown number. It said board meeting is canceled due to weather. I checked the HOA website. No announcement. I checked the Facebook group. Nothing. I replied, who is this? No response. I called the management company, got voicemail, left a message asking if the meeting was canceled. No callback. I drove to the clubhouse the next evening anyway. The parking lot was empty. The doors were locked. I took a photo of the dark building, timestamped, and posted it in the Facebook group with the caption, was the meeting actually canceled or was I just not invited? Within minutes, people started replying. 4 other homeowners said they had shown up and found it locked. 2 said they got the same text from an unknown number. 1 person said they had called the management company that morning and been told the meeting was still on. Linda posted in the thread and said, the meeting was postponed per emergency protocol due to active snow conditions. All residents were notified via the portal. I screenshot the thread, checked the portal, and found nothing. I replied, I received no portal notification, and the website shows no announcement. Can you provide the notification timestamp? She deleted her comment. That was when my insurance called. The woman on the phone said, we have received multiple complaints regarding your property, and we need to discuss your policy. I said, what complaints? She said, the HOA has filed 3 incident reports in the past 2 weeks claiming safety hazards, liability risks, and non-compliance with community standards. I said, those are all false. The HOA is retaliating because I questioned their process. She said, we are required to investigate, and if the complaints continue, we may have to non-renew your policy. I felt the ground shift under me. I said, so they can file bogus complaints, and you will just cancel me. She said, we have to take all complaints seriously, but if you have documentation showing the complaints are unfounded, you can submit that for review. I hung up and called Marcus. I was pacing my living room, barely keeping it together. I said, they are trying to get my insurance canceled. This is beyond fines now. This is sabotage. He said, that is actionable. That is tortious interference, but you need proof that the complaints are false and that they filed them in bad faith. I said, I have proof of everything. I have videos, emails, timestamps, metadata. He said, then you bring it all to the next board meeting, or you file in small claims and force them to respond under oath, but either way, you go public now. I emailed every board member directly. I used the contact list from the HOA website. I attached my evidence binder as a PDF, and I copied the management company and my landlord. The subject line was, formal complaint regarding fraudulent violation notices and retaliation. I laid it all out: the backdated vendor denial, the missing appeal instructions, the phantom deadlines, the bogus snow violations, the trespassing incident, the boot, the cancelled meeting, the insurance complaints. I ended with, I am requesting an immediate hearing to address these issues, and I am prepared to file a formal complaint with the state and pursue legal action if this is not resolved. The reply came from the HOA attorney, not Linda. It was a 2-sentence email. It said, "Your complaint has been received and will be reviewed. A hearing will be scheduled within 10 business days. Further communication will be through this office." I forwarded it to Marcus. He said, "They lawyered up, that means they are scared. Keep everything documented, and do not engage with Linda directly anymore." Linda did not get the memo. 2 days later, I was at the mailbox cluster at the curb, checking my mail, when she rolled up in her car and parked right behind me, blocking me in. She got out with her clipboard and that portable printer, and she said, "I need to talk to you about your refusal to cooperate." I said, "I was told all communication goes through the attorney." She stepped closer and said, "I am the records custodian. I have authority to enforce violations, and you are in violation right now." I said, "Of what?" She said, "Loitering in a common area during posted quiet hours." I looked around. It was 2 in the afternoon. I said, "It is 2 p.m., and I am getting my mail." She said, "The mailbox area is a snow route. You are creating an obstruction." I pulled out my phone and started recording. I said, "You are blocking my car, you are harassing me, and I am asking you to leave." She said, "If you want mercy, move somewhere without an HOA," and then she grabbed my snowbrush off the hood of my car, where I had left it after clearing my windshield that morning. She held it up and said, "This is abandoned property under Section 12-4. I am issuing a fine effective immediately." A sheriff's deputy pulled up 30 seconds later. Someone must have called. The deputy got out and said, "What is going on here?" Linda immediately switched tones. She said, "This resident is refusing to comply with community standards and using threatening language." I said, "I am getting my mail." She blocked my car and grabbed my property. The deputy looked at her car, looked at mine, and said, "Ma'am, you need to move your vehicle. You are blocking him in." She said, "I am conducting official HOA business." He said, "I do not care. Move your car now or I will cite you for obstruction." She stared at him, then at me, then got in her car and backed up 10 feet. The deputy asked if I wanted to file a report. I said, yes. He took my statement, took her information, and said, "I am noting this as harassment. If she contacts you again, call us immediately." Linda drove off, and I stood there shaking, not from fear, from adrenaline. I had it all on video. Her grabbing my snowbrush, her repeating the exact same line about mercy, her blocking my car, the deputy telling her to move. I uploaded the video to my cloud storage, and sent a copy to Marcus. He called me 5 minutes later and said, "This is gold. She just committed theft on camera, and she harassed you in front of a cop. You need to bring this to the hearing." The hearing notice came a week later. It was not a board meeting. It was a private hearing scheduled at the county courthouse annex in a small conference room the HOA rented for dispute resolution. The notice said I had 15 minutes to present my case, and the board would render a decision within 10 days. I read it twice and called Marcus. He said, "This is unusual. They are trying to control the environment, but it also means they are taking you seriously. Bring everything. Stay calm, and let the evidence speak." The morning of the hearing, I put on a clean button-down under my green jacket, grabbed my binder, and drove to the courthouse. I got there early and sat in the hallway, reviewing my notes. Linda showed up with 2 other board members and the HOA attorney, a tired-looking guy in a rumpled suit. They walked past me without speaking. At 9 a.m., the door opened, and we all filed in. The conference room was small, just a table and 8 chairs. A mediator from the county introduced herself and said, "This is an informal hearing. Both sides will have time to present. We are here to find a resolution." Linda went first. She stood up and said, "This resident has repeatedly violated snow removal standards, refused to comply with emergency protocols, used unauthorized vendors, and created multiple safety hazards." She handed the mediator a stack of printed notices. She said, "He has been given ample opportunity to correct these issues, and he has responded with hostility and threats." She sat down. The mediator looked at me and said, "Your turn." I stood up. I opened my binder. I said, "I am going to keep this short. I have documented every violation notice I received, and I have cross-referenced every citation against the HOA governing documents. Half the rules cited do not exist. The other half exist, but the enforcement process was not followed." I was never given appeal instructions, I was never notified of deadlines, and I was charged fines for violations that occurred after I had already complied. I handed the mediator my exhibit packet. I said tab 1 is the vendor application I submitted 3 months ago, with the portal confirmation. Tab 2 is the denial letter I received 2 weeks ago, with metadata showing it was created last week, not 3 months ago. That is fraud. The room went silent. The HOA attorney leaned over and whispered something to Linda. She did not look at him. I continued. I said, tab 3 is the doormat violation, which cited an emergency slip hazard rule that does not appear anywhere in the governing documents or the website. Tab 4 is the snow removal violation, which claimed I missed a deadline that was never communicated and is not supported by the bylaws. Tab 5 is video evidence of the record's custodian trespassing on my property, grabbing my personal property, and harassing me at the mailbox in front of a sheriff's deputy. I let that sit for a second. Then I said, I did not come here to argue about snow. I came here because this HOA has systematically violated its own process, falsified documents, and retaliated against me for asking questions. I sat down. The mediator flipped through the exhibits. She looked at the HOA attorney and said, do you want to respond? He cleared his throat and said, we will need time to review these allegations. The mediator said, the metadata issue is serious. If a document was backdated, that is a problem. She looked at Linda and said, can you explain this? Linda said, I do not have access to the metadata. That must be a system error. I said, I have the original file properties. I can provide a forensic analysis if needed. The attorney held up a hand and said, we are not disputing the document creation date, but that does not mean the denial was not communicated at the time of application. I said, then show me the original communication, because I have screenshots of the portal showing 0 messages. The mediator closed the binder and said, I am going to recommend a 30-day pause on all fines and enforcement actions while both parties work toward a resolution, and I am going to recommend the board conduct an internal audit of its notification and appeal processes. The attorney nodded. Linda looked like she wanted to argue, but the other board members were already standing up. The mediator said, I will send a written summary to both parties within 3 days. We filed out. I walked to my car, got in, and sat there for a minute, hands shaking. Marcus called. I answered and said, I think we won. He said, you did not win yet, but you made them blink. Now you wait and see if they fold or double down. They folded. 3 days later, I got an email from the management company. It said, after a thorough review, the board has determined that certain enforcement actions were initiated without proper adherence to notification requirements, and as a result, all fines related to snow removal, vendor approval, and property maintenance issued between December 1st and February 15th are hereby voided. Additionally, the board will be implementing revised notification protocols and updating the resident portal to ensure transparency. We apologize for any inconvenience and appreciate your patience as we work to improve our processes. I read it twice. I forwarded it to Marcus. He replied, that is a win. They refunded the fines and admitted fault. Now watch your account to make sure the ledger entries are actually voided. But I was not done. The email said nothing about Linda. I posted the email in the neighborhood Facebook group with the caption, for anyone who has been fighting bogus fines, the board just admitted their process was broken. You may want to request a review. Within an hour, 8 people commented saying they were going to file complaints. 2 people messaged me privately saying Linda had done the same thing to them. Backdated denials, phantom deadlines, harassment at the mailbox. The next board meeting was public. I showed up. So did 20 other residents. The board president opened the floor for comments, and one by one people stood up and told their stories. The vendor denial scam, the missing appeal instructions, the fake emergency rules, the gate code glitches. Linda sat at the front table, face red, not saying a word. When my turn came, I stood up and said, I want to thank the board for voiding my fines, but I also want to ask what is being done to ensure this does not happen again, because based on the comments tonight, this was not an isolated issue. The board president said, we are conducting a full audit of our enforcement records and working with the management company to implement better oversight. I said that is good, but I also think residents deserve to know what happened with the fraudulent vendor denial, because that is not a process issue, that is a potential crime. The room went quiet. The president said, we are looking into that matter internally. I said, I filed a sheriff's report, so I assume you are coordinating with them. He nodded and said, we will keep residents updated. Linda did not last another month. The board placed her on administrative leave pending the audit, and 2 weeks later, the management company sent an email saying the records custodian position was being restructured, and a new vendor would be handling document requests. The Facebook group post she had made, claiming I was a problem resident, got removed and replaced with a correction from the board stating that enforcement actions had been voided due to process failures. The HOA paid my filing fees to settle a small claims complaint I filed after the hearing, and they updated the bylaws to include mandatory appeal instructions on every notice. My insurance company closed the complaint file after I sent them the voiding email and the sheriff's report. My landlord called me and said, "I heard you had a rough time with the HOA, but it sounds like you handled it. Let me know if you need anything." I kept the binder. I kept every screenshot, every video, every email. I check the portal once a week now, and the notification system actually works. I have not seen Linda since the meeting. I heard she moved to a different complex across town. I hope she learned something, but I doubt it. The snow kept falling through March, but no one bothered me about it. I shoveled when I needed to. I cleared the walkway. I did my part. The orange cone that Linda had shoved aside in the slush that first day is still sitting in the corner of my carport, a little memento of the fight. I look at it sometimes and think about how close I came to just paying the fines and letting it go, because I was scared and broke and overwhelmed, but I did not. I fought back with paperwork and patience and a really good camera phone, and I won. If you are in an HOA nightmare right now, document everything, every email, every notice, every conversation. Check the governing documents, know your rights, and do not let them bully you into silence. They count on you being isolated and afraid. The moment you make it public, the moment you show up with evidence, they fold, because they know they cannot defend the indefensible. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.